The Galactic Jury Duty. Marcus Chen had always believed in the mundane predictability of life. 42 floors of concrete and glass housed his accounting firm in downtown Boston, and every morning at precisely 7:30 he would arrive with his usual coffee, black, no sugar, to begin another day of numbers, spreadsheets, and the comfortable monotony of corporate existence. That Tuesday morning in September started no differently. The autumn air carried that peculiar crispness that promised winter wasn't far behind. Marcus collected his mail from the lobby, the usual assortment of bills, advertisements, and credit card offers. But wedged between a utility statement and a flyer for a new pizza place, there was something else. The card was unlike anything he'd ever received. It appeared to be made of some kind of metal, yet it flexed like paper when he touched it. No postage, no return address, just his name printed in letters that seemed to shimmer when he tilted it toward the light. The text was brief and unsettling. Galactic Tribunal summons. Marcus Chen, juror number 7. Mandatory attendance. Non-compliance will result in immediate extraction. Marcus let out a short laugh. Someone's idea of a joke, probably. Maybe Dave from auditing. He was always pulling pranks. Marcus tossed the card into the recycling bin beside the elevator and thought nothing more of it. Until he found it on his desk an hour later. He stared at the metallic card sitting squarely in the center of his workspace, exactly where he'd left his morning reports. Marcus picked it up slowly, a cold sensation creeping up his spine. He was certain, absolutely certain, he'd thrown this away downstairs. He checked the recycling bin under his desk. Empty. "Dave!" he called out across the office floor. "Very funny, man. You can stop now." Dave looked up from his cubicle, confused. Stop what? Marcus held up the card, but Dave just shrugged and returned to his monitor. Unease settled in Marcus's stomach like a stone. He shoved the card into his jacket pocket and tried to focus on his work, but the numbers on his screen seemed to blur and shift. Twice he thought he saw that same shimmering quality in the spreadsheet cells, as if reality itself was glitching. By lunchtime, Marcus had decided he needed air. He walked to his favorite deli 3 blocks away, ordered his usual sandwich, and sat by the window. When he reached for his wallet, the card fell out on the table. He hadn't put it there. He'd left it in his jacket, which was hanging in his office. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The letters seemed brighter now, pulsing with an almost imperceptible rhythm, like a heartbeat. Marcus tried to tear it, but the material wouldn't yield. He tried bending it, but it simply returned to its original shape. In frustration, he left it on the table and walked away. It was in his car's cup holder when he returned. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, the card placed on his coffee table. He tried everything, burning it in the sink, putting it through the garbage disposal, even driving to the Charles River to throw it in. Each time, it reappeared, in his pocket, on his nightstand, once, impossibly, inside his refrigerator. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was impossible. Objects didn't teleport. Jury summons didn't come from galactic tribunals. But the card sat there, undeniably real, defying every law of physics he understood. At 11:43 that night, Marcus awoke to find his bedroom bathed in pale blue light. The card was floating 6 inches above his chest, spinning slowly, the text now glowing with intense luminescence. And then came the voice. It didn't come from any particular direction. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, a sound that bypassed his ears entirely and resonated directly in his mind. Marcus Chen, second notice. Appearance is mandatory. Non-compliance will result in immediate extraction. You have 12 hours to comply. Marcus scrambled backward, falling off his bed. "Who are you? What do you want?" Report to coordinates provided at designated time. Failure to appear will be interpreted as resistance. I can't. This is insane. I'm not going anywhere. The voice didn't respond. The light faded. The card dropped gently onto his comforter and lay still. Marcus didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee, trying to convince himself he was experiencing some kind of breakdown, stress-induced hallucinations. He'd been working too hard. That had to be it. But when dawn broke and the card was still there, still real, still impossible, Marcus knew he was out of options. The coordinates turned out to be an intersection in downtown Boston, right in the middle of the morning rush. Marcus stood there at exactly 9 a.m., feeling ridiculous, waiting for something he couldn't begin to imagine. People hurried past him, lost in their own worlds, nobody noticing the man standing perfectly still while chaos swirled around him. Then, the sky opened. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no great tearing of reality. One moment, Marcus was standing on a street corner in Boston. The next, a column of pale light descended from the cloudless sky and enveloped him. He felt a sensation like falling upward, his stomach lurching, the sounds of the city doppling away into silence. When his vision cleared, Marcus Chen was no longer on Earth.
The first thing Marcus noticed was the silence. Not an absence of sound, but a presence of it, as if silence itself had weight and texture. The second thing he noticed was that he was standing in a chamber so vast it made cathedrals look like closets. The walls were crystalline, but not in any way Marcus had seen before. They seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, their surfaces reflecting not just light, but possibilities, images of places and times that flickered at the edge of perception. The floor beneath his feet felt solid, yet when he looked down, he could see through it to depths that made his head spin. "Welcome, Juror 7. Marcus spun around. Standing before him was a figure that his brain struggled to process. It appeared humanoid in the most basic sense: 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But that's where the similarities ended. Its skin shifted between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes liquid, occasionally seeming to be nothing but contained energy. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, reflective surface that showed Marcus's own terrified expression. "Where am I? What is this?" "You are aboard the arbitration vessel Terminus. You have been selected to serve on a jury for the Galactic Tribunal. Your service is appreciated and mandatory." "Selected? I didn't volunteer for anything. I want to go home." The figure tilted its head in what might have been sympathy. "That is not currently an option. Please follow me to the jury chamber." Marcus wanted to run, but where would he go? He was on a spaceship or a space station or whatever this was, somewhere very far from Boston. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to follow the figure through corridors that seemed to shift and reconfigure as they walked. They emerged into a circular chamber where 11 other beings sat in elevated seats arranged in a semicircle. Marcus's breath caught. These weren't people. These were aliens. Actual, undeniable extraterrestrial life forms. To his left sat a creature that appeared to be made entirely of liquid, contained within an invisible barrier. Its form constantly rippled and flowed, occasionally forming shapes that might have been faces or hands before dissolving again. To his right, a being that looked like a fusion of stone and plant life, with crystalline formations growing from bark-like skin and leaves that shimmered with bioluminescence. Further down, Marcus saw something that resembled a mechanical spider, all chrome and glowing circuits. Next to it, a cloud of gas that pulsed with inner light, somehow maintaining a roughly spherical shape. And others, so many others, each more impossible than the last. "Please take your designated seat, Juror 7. Marcus climbed into the empty chair, his hands gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. The seat adjusted to his form with unsettling precision, and a translucent panel materialized in front of him, displaying text in English, somehow, impossibly, in his own language. "Is everyone here human?" Marcus whispered to the liquid being beside him. The creature's surface rippled, and a voice emerged that sounded like water over stones. "No, you are the only human. I am Zix of Aquaria Prime. This is your first time?" "First time? How many times have you done this?" Zix's form darkened, taking on a gray, stormy quality. "This is my third jury. I was not fast enough to save my world the first time." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, a sound resonated through the chamber, a deep, harmonic tone that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The center of the room illuminated, and a structure rose from the floor. It was a platform, and standing upon it was the most disturbing thing Marcus had yet seen: the Quorum. It appeared to be three beings fused into one, or perhaps one being expressing itself in three forms. The leftmost head was covered with what looked like eyes, hundreds of them, all blinking independently. The center head was smooth and featureless except for a mouth that opened vertically instead of horizontally. The right head seemed to be made of pure light, constantly shifting through colors Marcus had no names for. When it spoke, all three heads moved in unison, but each produced a different voice. Somehow, Marcus's brain processed them as a single statement. "The Tribunal of Galactic Justice is now in session. Juror 7, you have been selected to represent the interests of cognitive life forms in Sector 774. Your vote will carry equal weight with all other jurors." "I don't understand. What am I voting on?" "The defendant will now be presented." The chamber darkened, and in the space above the quorum, a hologram materialized. It took Marcus a moment to recognize what he was seeing, but when he did, his heart stopped. It was Earth. His planet. Rotated slowly in the air, rendered in perfect detail. He could see the blue of the oceans, the green of forests, and the white swirl of clouds over the Pacific. He could even make out the eastern seaboard of the United States, a thin line of lights indicating where he had been standing just hours ago. "The Tribunal calls to judgment Planet Earth, Sol System, designation Terra, charged with systematic destruction of host planet, genocidal warfare among dominant species, rapid depletion of finite resources, and behavior patterns indicating potential threat to galactic stability." Marcus felt as though he'd been punched in the stomach. "Wait, you're putting my entire planet on trial?" "Correct. As the only human present, you will provide context for your species' actions. The prosecution may begin."
A new figure entered the chamber. This one was tall and insectoid, with multiple arms that ended in delicate, precise appendages. Its head was dominated by compound eyes that reflected the hologram of Earth in thousands of tiny facets. "Honored quorum, fellow jurors," the creature began, its voice clicking and chittering, but somehow still understandable. "I am Prosecutor Vextha. The evidence against the defendant world is overwhelming and irrefutable." The hologram changed, showing images that made Marcus want to close his eyes. Clear-cut forests, oil spills spreading across oceans, nuclear mushroom clouds, mountains of plastic waste, species dying out at accelerating rates, the atmosphere's composition changing year by year. "In the past 200 solar cycles of their dominant species, the beings called humans have demonstrated a pattern of behavior that is consistent with what we term a failed civilization, one that lacks the maturity to survive contact with greater galactic society." Marcus wanted to object, to defend his species, but the images kept coming.
Wars, genocide, climate disasters, each one a wound inflicted by humanity upon itself and its world. Furthermore, Vextha continued, analysis indicates that this species is approaching technological capability for interstellar travel, given their documented history of colonization, exploitation, and warfare. The tribunal must consider whether allowing this civilization to continue poses an unacceptable risk to others. The liquid being beside Marcus, Zix, shifted uncomfortably in its container. Marcus turned to it. What happens if we're found guilty? Zix's response was barely a whisper, like rain on glass. Sterilization protocol. Your world will be cleaned, all complex life removed. The planet will be preserved for a more suitable species to evolve in a few million years. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. They'll kill everyone? 8 billion people? It has been done before, many times. The defense may now present their case, the quorum announced. The chamber waited. No one moved. Marcus looked around frantically. Who's defending us? Where's our lawyer? The stone plant being on his right spoke for the first time, its voice like wind through a forest. There is no defense advocate. Defendant worlds do not receive representation. That is why a human was brought here, to speak for your kind if you choose to. If I choose to? I'm not a lawyer. I'm an accountant. Nevertheless, the being continued with what might have been sympathy, you are all your world has. Marcus stood up shakily, his mind racing. All eyes and eye equivalents turned to him, the weight of 8 billion lives pressed down on his shoulders. He'd never even argued a parking ticket, and now he was expected to defend the entire human race? I don't know where to start, he began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Yes, we've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we've also created beautiful things. Art, music, literature. We've built civilizations, cured diseases, explored our solar system. We're capable of incredible compassion and love. Irrelevant, the quorum intoned. Beauty does not excuse genocide. Compassion means nothing when your species simultaneously wages war. Present evidence of your civilization's capacity for sustainable coexistence or concede the prosecution's case. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came, because deep down he knew the truth. How could he argue against the evidence? Humanity was destroying itself and its world. The images Vextha had shown weren't lies or exaggerations. They were news footage, satellite data, irrefutable fact. I need time, Marcus said quietly. I need to prepare a proper defense. The quorum's 3 heads conferred silently. Then, granted, the jury will reconvene in 24 Earth hours. Until then, all jurors will return to their observation quarters. The liquid beside Marcus rippled urgently. Use your time wisely, human. I have sat through 2 trials before. Both times the verdict was guilty. Both times I voted guilty because there was no choice. Learn from my regret. As guards, more of those shifting, impossible figures led him from the chamber, Marcus looked back at the hologram of Earth still rotating in the darkness. Somewhere down there, life continued. People woke up, went to work, loved and laughed and lived, completely unaware that their entire existence hung in the balance. And only Marcus Chen, a 42-year-old accountant from Boston who'd never even served on a jury before, stood between them and annihilation.
The observation quarters turned out to be a small room. At least, Marcus's mind interpreted it as a room, though the geometry didn't quite work.
The walls curved in ways that made his eyes hurt if he focused on them too long. There was something like a bed, something like a desk, and a viewport that showed the cosmos beyond. But the strangest part came when he lay down to rest. Within seconds, Marcus felt a lurching sensation, and suddenly he was standing in his own apartment in Boston. Same furniture, same crack in the ceiling he kept meaning to fix, same half-empty coffee mug on the counter from yesterday morning. He ran to the window. The city sprawled below, exactly as it should be. Cars moved through streets. People walked on sidewalks. Everything appeared normal. "This isn't real," Marcus whispered to himself. "It can't be real." But it felt real. When he picked up his coffee mug, it had weight and warmth. When he turned on his laptop, it booted up normally. He checked the news, regular programming, nothing about strange lights or missing accountants. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no messages. It was as if he'd never left. Except he had. He knew he had. Marcus realized what was happening. They were returning him to Earth between trial sessions, but somehow keeping him out of sync with normal time. His absence wasn't being noticed because from everyone else's perspective, he'd never disappeared. Time here moved differently, or was being manipulated, or something his accountant's brain had no framework to understand. He had 24 hours, real or simulated, to build a case for humanity's survival. Marcus spent the first hour in panic, pacing his apartment, trying to process what had happened. But accounting had trained him for one thing above all else: breaking down impossible problems into manageable pieces. He needed information, evidence, facts. He started with the internet, searching for humanity's greatest achievements, Nobel Prize winners, medical breakthroughs, moments of profound heroism and sacrifice. He made notes, compiled data, created the kind of presentation he might deliver to a corporate board. But as his list grew, a nagging doubt crept in. For every achievement, he could think of a counterexample. For every act of compassion, an act of cruelty. For every medical breakthrough, a weapon of war. The prosecution's case wasn't wrong. Humanity was self-destructive. How could he argue otherwise? Around midnight, exhausted and frustrated, Marcus found himself searching for something he'd remembered from a college philosophy class, the Fermi paradox. If the universe was so vast and old, where was everyone? Why hadn't humanity encountered alien life? One theory suggested a great filter, some challenge so difficult that most civilizations failed to overcome it. Maybe that's what the tribunal was, a literal filter, culling civilizations that showed signs of being too dangerous to survive. Marcus's blood ran cold. How many worlds had they judged? How many species had been sterilized? He needed to know more about this tribunal, about the other jurors, about the system itself. But his internet searches turned up nothing. Of course they wouldn't. This was all beyond Earth's knowledge. When dawn broke over his simulated Boston, Marcus felt the lurching sensation again. Reality shifted, and he found himself back in the alien chamber, sitting in his juror's seat. The other 11 beings were already present, emerging from whatever experiences their night had held. The quorum materialized on its platform. The trial will continue. The defense may present evidence. Marcus stood, his prepared notes feeling pathetically inadequate in his hands. Honored quorum, I'd like to present... Wait. The voice came from the gaseous being, the one that looked like a contained cloud of glowing particles. It spoke for the first time, its voice like wind through empty spaces. I have a question for the human before we proceed. How old is your civilization? That depends on how you define civilization. Written records go back maybe 5,000 years. Modern industrial society, a few hundred. And your species, how long have humans existed? About 300,000 years, I think? Maybe more? The gaseous being pulsed brighter. 300,000 years to reach this point. My species took 4 million. The quorum asks us to judge whether you've earned the right to continue. But by what standard? You're infants. How can we condemn children for not yet being adults? The mechanical spider being clicked loudly. Because these children have nuclear weapons and are developing faster than light theory, age is irrelevant when capability for destruction exists. But capability isn't the same as intent, Marcus argued, seizing the opening. Yes, we have weapons, but we've had them for 80 years and haven't used them to destroy ourselves. Doesn't that show restraint, growth, or merely fear of mutual destruction? Prosecutor Vexatha interjected. Restraint born from practicality is not the same as moral development.
The debate continued, back and forth, each juror expressing perspectives so alien to Marcus's experience that he struggled to follow the logic. Some argued for giving humanity more time. Others insisted that the pattern was clear. Humans would either destroy themselves or become a threat to others. During a recess, the stone plant being approached Marcus. Up close, it was even more impressive. Crystalline structures glowed from within its bark-like skin, and its leaves whispered with their own soft bioluminescence. "I am called Thornix," it said slowly, as if each word required great effort. "I have served on this jury for 1,000 of your years." Marcus stared. 1,000 years? How was that possible? "My species experiences time differently. To me, this trial feels like a brief moment, but I have witnessed many such moments." Thornix's leaves rustled sadly. "I have voted guilty 743 times. Each time I told myself it was necessary. Each time a world went silent." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what you're truly deciding. This is not about law or justice. This is about survival, yours and theirs." Thornix gestured toward the other jurors. "We are all here because our worlds failed this test in some way. We serve as jurors to spare others our fate, or so we tell ourselves. But I wonder if we're just becoming instruments of the very thing we fear." Before Marcus could respond, the quorum recalled them to session. The trial continued with a parade of evidence, both sides presenting data, historical parallels from other civilizations, statistical analyses of humanity's trajectory. It was all so clinical, so detached. Numbers and graphs determining the fate of billions of lives. By the time they adjourned for the second night, Marcus felt hollowed out. Nothing he'd said seemed to matter. The prosecution's case was airtight, and his defenses sounded like excuses even to his own ears. Back in his simulated apartment, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, looking out at a Boston that might not exist tomorrow, and tried to understand what was really happening here. Then he remembered something Thornix had said. "We are all here because our worlds failed this test in some way." Marcus's mind started connecting dots. Zix had mentioned this was its third jury. Thornix had served for 1,000 years. All the jurors were from different worlds, different species. None of them were from successful civilizations. They were from failed ones. With trembling hands, Marcus returned to his laptop and started a different kind of search. Not about humanity's achievements, but about the trial itself. He needed to know more about how this system worked, what happened to jurors, what happened to worlds found guilty. His search led him to an obscure database he'd been given access to. Apparently, jurors were allowed to review past cases. He started reading. Case after case, world after world.
Species with names he couldn't pronounce, crimes he could barely understand, and verdict after verdict after verdict. Guilty. 847 trials in the tribunal's records. 847 guilty verdicts. Not a single world had ever been found innocent. His hands shook as he scrolled through the files. Every single civilization brought before this tribunal had been judged, condemned, and eradicated. The sterilization protocol mentioned in each case file, a clinical term for genocide on a planetary scale. But something else caught his eye. In the margins of some files, there were notes, comments from previous jurors, and one phrase kept appearing, written by different beings in different languages, but translated the same way. I had no choice. He clicked on one of the comments, expanding it. The writer identified itself as Juror Vix from the Melodian cluster, case number 612. My family watches from cryogenic suspension. They show me images before each vote. My mate, my offspring. The quorum made it clear. Vote guilty, and they survive. Vote innocent, and they die with me. Is this justice? Is this law? I have become a killer to save those I love. May whatever gods exist forgive me, for I cannot forgive myself. Marcus's blood turned to ice. He opened another comment from a different case. They promised us our world would be spared if we served. 300 trials later, I asked when we could go home. They showed me what remained, an empty planet, atmosphere stripped, oceans evaporated. They lied. They always lie. But I am too afraid to stop voting. What does that make me? Another one. To future jurors reading this, you are not judges. You are executioners, and they will never let you go. Marcus stood up so fast his chair toppled over. His heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't a trial. It was theater. The verdict was predetermined. The jury was just... He had to tell someone. He had to tell the other jurors. But even as the thought formed, he realized the danger. If the tribunal knew he'd discovered this, what would they do? Would they simply eliminate him and bring in another human? He spent the rest of that night reading every case file he could access, taking notes, looking for anything that might help. As the fabricated sun rose over his fabricated city, Marcus Chen understood that he wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. He was fighting against the entire system. The third day of trial began with Marcus exhausted but wired with adrenaline and barely controlled fear. He watched the other jurors take their seats, seeing them differently now. They weren't his fellow judges, they were fellow prisoners. Prosecutor Vexthak continued presenting evidence, more footage of human atrocities, more data on environmental destruction. The case was overwhelming by design. Meanwhile, Marcus waited, trying to figure out how to reveal what he'd learned without getting everyone killed. During the first recess, he approached Sykes. The liquid being rippled nervously as Marcus leaned close. I need to tell you something, but not here. Is there somewhere private? Sykes's form darkened with what might have been suspicion or fear. Why would you need privacy from the tribunal? They observe everything. That's exactly why I need to talk to you. After a long moment, Sykes flowed slightly toward a corner of the chamber where the crystalline walls met at an odd angle. Sometimes the geometry here creates blind spots. Acoustics are strange. We have perhaps 30 seconds before it corrects. Marcus followed, his heart pounding. I found records from past trials, all 847 of them. Every single verdict was guilty. This isn't a trial, it's an execution with extra steps. Sykes' surface went perfectly still. Marcus was learning this meant shock or deep thought. That's impossible. Surely some civilizations were found innocent. None, not one. And I found juror notes. They're not choosing to vote guilty. They're being coerced. Families held hostage. Threats, manipulation. We're not judges, Sykes. We're victims. You cannot possibly know that for certain. The records could be incomplete, or can you look me in the eye and tell me you chose to be here, that you volunteered for this duty? Sykes said nothing. The geometry was already shifting, the blind spot closing. Tonight, Marcus hissed, in the observation quarters, find a way to talk to the others. We need to meet. Before Sykes could respond, the quorum called them back to order. The trial ground forward, but Marcus barely heard it. He was watching the other jurors, trying to assess who might be allies. Thornix had already expressed doubts. The gaseous being had defended humanity. But what about the others? The mechanical spider being, Kalma, had spoken very little. It sat perfectly motionless, its optical sensors fixed on the proceedings. When Marcus caught its gaze, he saw his own reflection multiplied across dozens of lenses. Was it observing him, judging him, or trapped just like the rest? That night, back in his simulated apartment, Marcus didn't even pretend to sleep. He sat at his desk, waiting. For what, he wasn't entirely sure. But if Sykes had managed to spread the word, if any of the other jurors believed him. A ripple disturbed the air in front of him, and suddenly Sykes was there, or rather a projection of Sykes. The liquid being's form looked less stable, more agitated. I spoke with Thornix. It took very little convincing. They have suspected for centuries, but lacked proof. The others, some are willing to listen. How many? Perhaps 5, including myself and Thornix. The others are either too afraid or too invested in the system. Kalma, the mechanical one, is the most dangerous. It serves the tribunal directly, as an observer. It has been monitoring you since you arrived. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Then Kalma knows I found the records? Almost certainly, which means the quorum knows. The question is why they haven't acted. A horrible thought occurred to Marcus. Unless they want me to know, unless this is all part of the process. What do you mean? Think about it. Every trial ends in guilty, but they need the veneer of legitimacy. They need jurors to actually deliberate, to appear to weigh the evidence. What if they let people discover the truth occasionally just to see what they'll do? Maybe that's the real test, not of the worlds on trial, but of the jurors themselves. Sykes's form went still again. You're suggesting this is all orchestrated, that we're being observed not just as jurors, but as subjects of an experiment. I'm suggesting we have no idea what we're really part of, but I know one thing. I'm not going to play along anymore. Marcus, if you refuse to participate, they will simply replace you. Another human will be brought here, and they won't have the knowledge you have gained. Earth will still be judged. You'll have accomplished nothing except your own death. Maybe, or maybe if I break the pattern, something changes. These records go back centuries, maybe longer. How many jurors have tried to resist? How many have just gone along because they were too afraid to do anything else? Sykes rippled with what might have been admiration or pity. You're talking about rebellion against a power that spans galaxies, with 5 allies out of 12 jurors. The mathematics are not in your favor, Marcus Chen. I'm an accountant. I understand math. I also understand that sometimes the numbers don't capture everything that matters. Over the next several hours, more projections appeared in Marcus's apartment. Thornix, the gaseous being who identified itself as Whisper, 2 others, a being made of what looked like living crystal, and something that resembled a floating collection of geometric shapes. They talked in hushed tones, sharing their own stories. Thornix had been taken from its world after an environmental catastrophe its people couldn't prevent. Whisper's civilization had destroyed itself in a civil war. Each of them had been offered the same deal: serve on the tribunal, help prevent other species from making the same mistakes, and perhaps earn a chance at redemption. But redemption never came. The trials continued, the guilty verdicts mounted, and slowly they each realized they weren't judges, they were accomplices. I have voted to exterminate 682 civilizations, Thornix said, his voice heavy with centuries of grief. I tell myself that I had no choice, that I was following the evidence, that I was protecting the galaxy from dangerous species. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was afraid. I am still afraid. What if we all vote innocent, the crystalline being suggested. All 12 of us. They couldn't overrule a unanimous jury. They would find a way, or they would simply declare a mistrial and impanel a new jury. The system is designed to reach only one outcome.
Marcus had been thinking about this all night. Then we don't just vote innocent, we expose the system, make them acknowledge what this really is. To whom would we expose it? Thornix asked. We are isolated here. There is no higher authority to appeal to. The quorum is the highest authority. Then we expose it to each other, to future jurors. We break the silence. A symbolic gesture, the geometric being said dismissively, meaningless in practical terms. Maybe, Marcus conceded, but I'd rather die making a meaningless gesture than live as an instrument of genocide. The group fell silent. Through his apartment window, Marcus could see the lights of Boston, fake lights in a fake city maintained by a civilization that might not exist in a few days. Every person down there, real or simulated, represented someone on Earth who had no idea their fate was being decided by a rigged court light years away. There's another option, Kalma said. Marcus spun around. The mechanical spider being stood in the doorway of his apartment, not a projection, but physically present. Its multiple limbs clicked against the hardwood floor. How long have you been listening? Marcus demanded. Since the beginning. I am, as Zix correctly assessed, an observer for the tribunal. My function is to monitor jurors for signs of non-compliance and report to the quorum. The other jurors' projections flickered with alarm. Thornix spoke first. Then we are already lost. You will report this conversation and we will all be recycled. No, Kalma said quietly. I will not report this conversation, because I want to tell you what I've learned in my 900 years of observation. Marcus felt his pulse slow slightly. You're not going to turn us in? I am going to tell you the truth, the whole truth, not the sanitized version the quorum provides. Kalma's optical sensors dimmed, and when it spoke again, its mechanical voice carried something Marcus hadn't heard before: emotion. The Galactic Tribunal was not always like this. 40,000 years ago, it was created with genuine purpose, to mediate disputes between civilizations, to prevent wars, to guide young species toward maturity. But power corrupts even the most noble intentions. Kalma moved to the window, looking out at the false city. Gradually, the tribunal's role changed. They began intervening earlier and earlier in species development. They started judging potential threats rather than actual ones. And they discovered something useful. Fear works better than law. Fear of what? Whisper asked. Fear of chaos. The galaxy is vast and ancient, filled with civilizations at every stage of development. Some are peaceful, some are expansionist, some are incomprehensible. The tribunal convinced themselves, and many others, that the only way to maintain order was through absolute control. They became judges, jury, and executioners. But why the pretense, Marcus demanded? Why this elaborate trial system if the verdict is predetermined? Because, Kalma replied, even tyranny requires legitimacy. The tribunal needs the appearance of justice to maintain support from the civilizations under its jurisdiction. And because some part of them, perhaps the last shred of their original purpose, still believes they might be wrong occasionally. So they go through the motions, hoping that someday a world will prove itself worthy of mercy. Has any world ever managed that? Thornix asked. No,
Because the standards are impossible. They judge young species by the wisdom of ancient ones. They demand perfection from species still learning to walk. It's designed to fail. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. So what's your other option? You said there was one. Kalma turned all its optical sensors on Marcus. There is an archive, deep within this vessel, in a section that even most tribunal officials don't access. It's where they store the real records, not the sanitized case files you found, but everything. Recordings of deliberations, evidence of coercion, proof of worlds that were destroyed despite having committed no actual crimes. You want us to steal it, Zik said. I want you to do more than steal it. I want you to broadcast it. Throughout this vessel, throughout tribunal space, I want every civilization that bows to the Quorum's authority to see exactly what that authority is built upon. That's suicide, the crystalline being said. They'll kill us all. Yes, Karma agreed. They will. But you'll have broken the cycle. Future jurors will know the truth from the beginning. Civilizations will start questioning the tribunal's legitimacy. It won't topple the system immediately. Something this vast and old has tremendous inertia, but it will be the first crack in the foundation. Marcus looked at each of the assembled beings. They were so different, liquid and gas, crystal and stone, organic and mechanical, yet all united by the same terrible knowledge. They had all been complicit in atrocities. They had all rationalized their choices. And now they all faced the same question. Would they die doing nothing or die doing something? I'm in, Marcus said, for whatever my vote is worth. As am I, Thornix added. I have lived with guilt for 1,000 years. Perhaps it's time to live with purpose instead, however briefly. One by one the others agreed. Even the geometric being who had been most skeptical acknowledged that a symbolic gesture was better than none at all. We have perhaps 6 hours before the final session begins. The archive is heavily protected, but I have access codes. The greater challenge will be broadcasting the information without being immediately shut down. Can you do it? Marcus asked. Alone? No. But there are others like me, observers who have grown weary of what they observe. I can reach them, bring them to our cause. It won't be many, but it might be enough. The meeting dissolved, each juror returning to their observation quarters to prepare. Marcus sat alone in his false apartment, watching the false sun rise over false Boston, and wondered if anyone back on actual Earth had noticed his absence yet. Did his coworkers wonder where he was? Did anyone care? Probably not. He was just an accountant, unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of person who could disappear and leave barely a ripple. Maybe that's why the tribunal chose him. They wanted someone who wouldn't be missed, someone who would vote the way they were told and then fade away. They hadn't counted on an unremarkable accountant deciding to be remarkable for once in his life.
The final session of the trial arrived with a weight that seemed to press down on the entire chamber. Marcus took his seat among the other jurors, acutely aware that several of them were now co-conspirators. Kalma sat in its position, completely motionless. To any observer, just another dutiful juror waiting to fulfill its function. But beneath that stillness, Marcus knew, plans were in motion. The quorum materialized on its platform, its 3 heads moving in that unsettling, synchronized way. The tribunal will now hear closing arguments. Prosecution, you may proceed. Vextha delivered a masterful summary, point by point, dismantling any notion that humanity deserved to continue. Climate destruction, nuclear weapons, persistent warfare, wealth inequality, the systematic elimination of other species. Every sin catalogued, every failure highlighted. Marcus had to admit it was compelling. If he'd been judging humanity from a purely objective standpoint, he might have voted guilty himself. The defense may now deliver closing remarks. Marcus stood, his notes clutched in trembling hands. But as he looked at them, all his carefully prepared arguments about human potential and artistic achievement, they suddenly seemed hollow. The tribunal didn't care about potential. They cared about control. He set the notes down. I'm not going to defend humanity, not in the way you expect, because you're right. We're flawed. We're destructive. We make terrible choices. We hurt each other and our world. All of that is true. He could feel the confusion in the chamber. This wasn't how a defense was supposed to go. But here's what I've learned in the past 3 days. This trial isn't about justice. It's not even really about humanity. It's about maintaining a system that depends on fear and control. Juror 7, you will confine your remarks to the case at hand, the quorum warned. I found the records. 847 previous trials. 847 guilty verdicts. Not a single world found innocent. Because innocence isn't the point. The point is elimination. The chamber erupted in alarm. Guards began moving toward Marcus's position, but Thornix stood up. Then Ziox, then Whisper. One by one, the conspirators rose. The jurors will be seated, the quorum commanded, its 3 voices no longer harmonious, but discordant with anger. We will not, Thornix replied, its ancient voice carrying authority. We have been complicit for too long. This ends now. Kalma suddenly moved with shocking speed, its mechanical limbs interfaced with the chamber's control systems. Screens flickered to life around the room, displaying files, thousands of them, case records, interrogation transcripts, communications between tribunal officials discussing quotas for sterilizations. What you see before you is truth, Kalma announced, its voice now broadcasting throughout the entire vessel. The Galactic Tribunal has never been about justice. It has been about power. These are the civilizations destroyed not because they were dangerous, but because they were inconvenient. These are the jurors coerced into voting against their conscience. This is what lies beneath the tribunal's authority. Alarms blared. More guards poured into the chamber, but something unexpected happened. Some of them stopped. Some of them turned away from the jurors and toward the quorum instead. What's happening? Marcus asked. Remember, I said there were others like me, observers who have grown weary. They're seeing the truth now, along with everyone else on this vessel, and some of them are choosing a different path. The quorum's 3 heads writhed in fury. This is treason. This is chaos. You are destroying order. No, Marcus said. We're destroying a lie. There's a difference. The verdict will proceed. All jurors will vote. We refuse, Ziox said simply. Refusal is not permitted. And yet we refuse anyway, unanimously. The chamber began to shake. Energy crackled around the quorum's platform. Marcus realized with cold clarity that they were out of time. The tribunal wasn't going to allow this rebellion to continue. Kalma, Marcus said urgently. Did the broadcast work? Did it reach beyond this vessel? Affirmative. The data is propagating through tribunal communication networks. It cannot be fully contained. Then we've done what we came to do. We will have order, the quorum shrieked, all pretense of judicial dignity abandoned. Initiate Protocol Omega, eliminate all jurors, and begin emergency sterilization of Earth.
Marcus felt his heart stop. No, they can't. They can and will, Thornix said with ancient sadness. This was always a possibility. But Marcus, look. Thornix pointed to the screens Kalma had activated. They showed other vessels, dozens of them, throughout tribunal space.
On each one, beings were gathering, watching the broadcasts, seeing the truth. Some were protesting, some were abandoning their posts. The carefully maintained order of 40,000 years was beginning to crack. "It won't save Earth today," Thornix continued, "but it may save countless worlds tomorrow. Is that not worth the price?" Guards were surrounding them now, weapons charging. Marcus looked at his fellow jurors, beings he'd known for only days, but who had become something like friends in that time. They had all chosen to stand up. They had all chosen truth over survival. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," Marcus whispered to the hologram of Earth that still rotated in the chamber's center. Then Whisper said something that made Marcus look up. "Wait, the sterilization order, it's being blocked." On the screens, lines of code scrolled past, override commands, cancellation protocols, and dozens of different user signatures, observers, and technicians throughout the tribunal system countermanding the quorum's order. "The broadcast is working faster than they anticipated. Too many beings are questioning orders simultaneously. The command structure is breaking down." The quorum's 3 heads swiveled in different directions, as if searching for enemies that were suddenly everywhere and nowhere. "This is impossible. This system cannot fail. This system is absolute." "No system is absolute," Marcus said. "That's what you never understood. You built everything on control, but control is an illusion. The moment people stop choosing to obey, your power evaporates." Energy weapons fired. Marcus felt searing pain and then sudden nothing. The last thing he saw was Earth, still rotating peacefully in the hologram's center, unaware of how close it had come to extinction. And then, darkness. 2 months later. Marcus Chen woke up in his apartment in Boston. For a long moment, he lay perfectly still, trying to determine if he was dead, dreaming, or in another simulation. The ceiling had the same crack. The morning light came through the window at the same angle. His alarm clock read 7:15 a.m. He sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. His mouth tasted like copper, and his head pounded like he'd been drinking for days. But he was alive, definitely alive. Marcus stumbled to his kitchen and made coffee with shaking hands. The news played on his laptop. Regular programming, nothing about alien tribunals or near extinctions. He checked his phone. No messages, no missed calls. According to his calendar, it was Wednesday in November, 2 months after he'd been taken. But according to his email, he'd been responding to work messages the entire time. According to his bank records, he'd been buying groceries and paying bills. According to every objective measure, Marcus Chen had never disappeared at all. Except he had the memories. And he had something else. On his kitchen counter, exactly where it had appeared months ago, was the metallic card. But now it looked different. The text had changed. The new Galactic Council observer position offered Marcus Chen, response requested, not required. Marcus picked it up, turned it over in his hands. Unlike before, he felt no compulsion, no threats, just an invitation. He made his coffee, carried it to the window, and looked out at the city waking up below. Somewhere out there, 8 billion people lived their lives completely unaware of what had almost happened. They would never know how close they had come, how an unremarkable accountant and a handful of aliens had stood between them and oblivion. The news anchor was talking about climate change now, political gridlock, rising tensions between nations, all the same problems that had nearly gotten humanity wiped out. Nothing had changed down here, but something had changed up there. Marcus's laptop chimed with a news alert. He clicked on it out of habit and froze. Unexplained astronomical event. New star appears in night sky. Puzzles astronomers worldwide. The article included images from observatories around the world. In a region of space that had been empty before, a bright point of light now shone. Not a natural star, the scientists said. The spectrum was all wrong. It was too geometric, too precise, almost like a structure of some kind. The article included quotes from confused astrophysicists speculating about everything from supernovae to aliens. Marcus smiled because he knew exactly what it was. The new Galactic Council had established a home base. The rebellion had not only survived, it had succeeded in creating something new, something better. The tribunal still existed, apparently, but its authority was now challenged. Dozens of worlds had withdrawn their support. Others were demanding reforms. The revolution Kalma had predicted wouldn't happen overnight, but it had begun. Marcus thought about his fellow jurors. Had they survived too? Had they been returned to their worlds, or had they stayed to help build the new system? He hoped they were alive somewhere, though he suspected some had paid the ultimate price.
His phone rang, making him jump. Unknown number. Marcus answered it cautiously. Hello? Static, then a voice that sounded like water over stones. Marcus Chen, this is Zykes. I hope this communication reaches you intact. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. Zykes, you're alive? Barely. The Quorum attempted to eliminate all of us, but Kalma's network managed to shield most of the jurors and transport us to safety. We have established a new council, as you've likely seen in your sky. I just read about it. Are the others okay? Thornix is well, and sends regards. Whisper is helping establish communication protocols with civilizations that wish to join us. 3 of our group did not survive the escape. They are remembered. Marcus closed his eyes, grief and relief washing over him in equal measure. And Earth, what's our status? The sterilization order was successfully blocked, though it was close. Earth remains under observation, but not by the old tribunal. The new council's approach is different. We offer guidance to species that request it, but we do not judge. We do not execute. We watch, and we wait, and we hope. That's all anyone can ask for, Marcus said quietly. There is more. The evidence Kalma broadcasted has had repercussions throughout the galaxy. 27 civilizations have filed formal challenges against the tribunal. 16 worlds previously sterilized are being investigated as potential murders. The old order is dying, Marcus. What you began in that chamber, it continues to spread. What I began? I just refused to vote guilty. You did more than that. You broke the silence. You made others remember that they had a choice. Never underestimate the power of that. There was a long pause, filled with the hiss of space-time being bent to allow this communication. The card you received, the offer is genuine. We need observers, beings who can move among developing worlds, watching for genuine threats, but also protecting those worlds from interference. It would be dangerous work. You would see things that might break your heart, but you would also be ensuring that what happened to us, what nearly happened to Earth, doesn't happen to others. Marcus looked at the card on his counter, then out at the city, then up at the sky where a new star burned with impossible light. I'll think about it, he said. That's all we ask. The offer has no expiration. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, simply hold the card and think, yes, someone will come for you. Zykes, before you go, why me? Out of 8 billion humans, why was I chosen for the jury? The liquid being made a sound that might have been laughter. According to tribunal records, you were selected at random from a pool of candidates. But I've often wondered if there's more to it than that. Perhaps the universe knew it needed someone ordinary, someone who understood numbers and systems, but who could still see past them to what really mattered. Or perhaps it was just luck. Some luck, Marcus muttered. Indeed, but you turned that luck into something meaningful. Few beings can say the same. Take care, Marcus Chen. We'll speak again. The line went dead. Marcus stood there for a long time, holding his phone, processing everything. Finally, he set down his coffee, walked to his desk, and opened his laptop. He composed an email to his boss. I need to take some time off. Personal matters. I'm not sure how long. Then he closed the laptop, picked up the metallic card, and looked at it really carefully for the first time. On the back, in letters so small he'd never noticed them before, was a message. Not all who wander are lost. Not all who fall are defeated. Not all who question are rebels. But some who do all three change everything. Marcus smiled. He walked to his closet, pulled out a backpack, and began to pack. He wasn't sure where he was going yet, wasn't sure if he'd take the council's offer, but he knew he couldn't just go back to spreadsheets and quarterly reports, not after seeing the universe for what it really was, vast and dangerous and full of beings trying their best to survive. Maybe he'd travel for a while, see Earth while it was still here, talk to people, listen to their stories, try to understand what made humanity worth saving, so that if he ever had to defend it again, he'd have better answers than he had in that chamber. Or maybe eventually he'd hold that card and think, yes. Maybe he'd become an observer, watching over young civilizations the way no one had truly watched over his own, making sure that when they were judged, and they would be judged because the universe was harsh and unforgiving, at least someone would be there to tell their full story. Marcus looked at the new star in the data stream on his laptop once more, then closed everything down. He grabbed his backpack, took a last look around his apartment, and walked out the door. Behind him, on the kitchen counter, the card lay there where he'd left it, waiting. In the sky above Boston, invisible to human eyes but burning bright in frequencies only certain instruments could detect, the new Galactic Council's beacon pulsed with a message in 1,000 languages. We are here. We are watching. We are learning. We are hoping. Join us in building something better. And across the galaxy, on countless worlds, beings looked up at that light and made their choices. Some to join, some to resist, some simply to wonder what came next. The old order had fallen. The new one was being built. And in the space between, everything was possible. Marcus Chen, unremarkable accountant from Boston, had helped make that possible. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person, one choice, one moment of courage. The universe remembered.